Hey, Pillow Talk Pretty Things family. So tonight I wanted to touch base with you and talk about something that is important to me, which is the practice of self-care. And a lot of times when we hear the terminology self-care, we think about mani-pedis, we think about a bubble bath, we think about doing yoga, we think about going out and doing some retail therapy. And while all these things are really great and nice and they feel good and we feel like we're treating ourselves to something special, self-care goes a little bit deeper than the surface. And if you know, July 24th was actually International Self-Care Day. And this got me thinking about myself and some of the ways in which I practice self-care, and really just to be reflective, am I really practicing self-care? Because I'll be the first person to admit that when I think about self-care, I think about going to get my nails done, and I think about, getting a massage and that sort of thing. And yes, I do enjoy those things, and yes, it is a part of my caring for myself routine. There are some other areas of my life that I really need to be more reflective on in relation to my self-care. And one of those areas is related to avoiding risky behaviors. And the reason why avoiding risky behaviors becomes so important in self-care is because it's one of the areas that we often overlook, to be honest with you. Because I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, duh, of course we should be avoiding risky behaviors. But how often do we actually sit back and think about our risky behaviors and then put things in place or put things in motion to actually avoid those risky behaviors? For example, if you know that you have a bill coming due every month, like your car payment or your mortgage, that sort of thing, and a new pair of shoes has just come out, or a new bag, or some extreme purchase that you want to make, and you just bypass that bill for that time being and purchase this big purchase that you want, because you say to yourself, oh, I'm going to pay the bill anyway. But now you have a late ding on your credit report because you chose to buy this item rather than paying your bill. That's not practicing self-care, because now you're engaging in this risky behavior that's going to impact your credit score. And it's a risky behavior because, number one, you didn't have to buy that item. You could have waited. And number two, it's hurting you in the long run. It's hurting you in the long run. Another example, you go out with your friends and you party all the time. No big deal. We all like to party. But how often do you then get in your car and drive off after you've been drinking and thinking, oh, I'm fine, I can drive just fine? But we all know that inebriated, your level of response is completely different. And so now you're not practicing self-care because you're putting your physical self at risk as well as the physical safety of others at risk. There's a song that my kids listen to. This is my transparency piece. There's a song that my kids listen to all of the time. The title of the song is New Rules. And I'm not going to tell you what the song is about. You're going to have to listen to it to figure it out, in relation to what I'm talking about. But that's my risky behavior. And so I have to listen to that song to remind myself frequently that I have participated in this particular risky behavior in the past, and it's not something that I want to revisit, and it's not something that I want to continue to practice. And one of the things that's important is that when we're talking about our risky behaviors, we have to find a way to stop the risky behavior and to correct the risky behavior. And there's a couple of things that you need to do in order to do that I found that have worked for me. The first of those is you have to confront the risky behavior. And by doing that, this is probably the most difficult piece, because when you confront your risky behavior, you're actually admitting to yourself that you're participating in things that really aren't good for you. And no one wants to say to themselves in the mirror, hey self, what you're doing really sucks. So you have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to say, this is a risky behavior and this is something that I no longer want to participate in because it's not good for me. It's not good for my physical health. It's not good for my emotional health, and it's not good for my mental health, whatever your example may be. And then not only do you have to confront it, but you also then have to find a way to replace that risky behavior. And when we're talking about replacing the risky behavior, we're talking about putting practices in place in your life where you're not going to be in that situation to participate in the risky behavior. The behavior itself is easy to not do. because we know it takes 21 days to break a habit, fine. But it's when we put ourselves in that situation and we're not thinking ahead of schedule that we're putting ourselves in that situation, that's where the problem comes in. So, for example, the example I gave earlier about paying your bill. One of the things that worked for me when I had that issue was just simply putting things on auto pay. The money was automatically, deducted. I didn't necessarily miss it per se. And if I had a purchase that I wanted to make and it was really, really that important to me, then I would save up for it and buy it. And then actually what I found was, like, after a month or so, like, the desire for the item went away. I didn't even need it. I had this money saved up and I just kept the money. Not a big deal. Now the issue with, partying with your friends. Like I said, we all like to party, but if you're with a group of people and that's all they're interested in doing, then it might be time for you to switch up your social circle. If not, take an Uber or a Lyft to wherever you're going and to home. If you don't have it in your area, one of the things you can do that I've seen people do, they give their keys to the bartender and say, hey, if by the end of the night, if I can't drive, can you just call me a cab? No big deal. Those are very, very simple things. Now, as far as like in my transparency related to my risky behavior, like I said, I listened to the song. I stopped returning text messages. I stopped returning phone calls. I stopped returning emails. Then it got to the point where, the person would, just show up at my house and, that would always become an issue. And so like I literally physically removed myself. I moved. And I know it's like, well, not everybody can move. I get that. I'm not saying that you just need to pack up and move. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it worked for me because now that person doesn't know where I live and they can't just pop up and disrupt my peace because that person still probably doesn't recognize, the dysfunction and the risky behavior. And so because that person didn't recognize it, that person was like, well, I don't get what the big deal is. Like, what's the issue? And so I got tired of trying to explain that to that person. So that's the other thing about your risky behavior. The risky behavior may only be a risky behavior to you. And you can't expect other people to recognize your risky behavior. So it's on you to change that risky behavior because it's about you. It's not about anyone else. Now, you changing your risky behavior will impact other people. And then that's where you're going to see a little bit of kickback, I would say. But again, it's not about them. It's about you. It's about you having a peace of mind. It's about you having emotional health. It's about you having your physical health. And it's about you practicing self-care by getting rid of these risky behaviors that good and goddamn well are not good for you at all. They seem good in the beginning. They seem good in the immediacy. But when you take a step back and you look and you say, where has this behavior gotten me? Where has this action gotten me? And if it hasn't gotten you peace, if it hasn't gotten you financial security, if it hasn't gotten you love, if it hasn't brought you light, joy, any of that, it's a risky behavior. And it's not something that you need to participate in. And I encourage you to take a step back, to look at your risky behavior, confront your risky behavior, tell yourself it exists, and then replace that risky behavior with something else to where you're no longer practicing it and you're no longer putting yourself in that situation to be a part of that risky behavior. So moving forward, I really want you to think about your self-care practices and really take a look at your risky behaviors and then try to make some moves to adjust those, change those, and eliminate those risky behaviors from your life.